This is Jamey with Stonemeyer Games, and today I'm going to talk about my favorite mechanism in Tainted Grail. I got to play Tainted Grail for the first time this past weekend with 3 other people. We all wore masks, of course, and we had a great time. We played, I think, over the course of 3 or 4 days. It took us about 3 hours, and yeah, I'll talk about my favorite mechanisms today. Here are some photos I took of the playthrough. One thing that I really liked about the game is how this player mat worked. It's a dual layered player mat, kind of like in our game Scythe, where you keep tokens in there. That's really nice. I also really like how the character mat, so like this part is generic. It can fit for any character. You have your own individual character that is double-sided, with one side being for setup, and then you flip that side over and never have to look at it again for the rest of the game because you don't need to remember the setup. It's already set up, and the other side shows any ongoing abilities. I thought that was a really, really clever implementation, and it locks in really nicely into the player mat. I also really like how health worked in this game. So this is the health marker right here. This is energy, and this is something like fear. But this is the health marker. Whenever your health goes down, it basically decreases the threshold for which you can gain energy. So you can't gain more energy than you have health. So I like how this token actually like blocks the amount of health that you can gain as it moves, or the amount of energy you can gain as you move down. I thought that was really clever. Here's a photo from the initial setup of this is not like a monster we're fighting. This is called a menhir in the game. This is an ancient statue that we are learning more about as our characters explore this world. So I like those mechanisms a lot. I think my favorite mechanism in the game, actually no, I also want to mention that I like that whenever you have an encounter, you have an opportunity to leave the encounter. So if you go hunting and you stumble upon a giant rat and it isn't going well for you, or you are not interested in fighting this rat, you can simply run away. And sometimes there's a cost to that. Sometimes you might lose something. Sometimes not. You can just run away from it. I really liked having that option. I also want to mention, 2 things here. So kind of 2 favorite mechanisms that I really like in the game. One is related to the 2 decks that each character has. Each character has a combat deck and a diplomacy deck, and you use them in different situations. I just mentioned we're in a situation where you might go hunting. In that situation, you're going to use your combat deck, and you'll use the cards in a very similar way to the diplomacy deck, but they're completely different cards. And you line them up in a row. I'd recommend watching a video about Tainted Grail if you want to see a visual of this. I don't have a photo of it handy here. But you'll kind of play cards one by one in a row, matching up combat-related abilities as you do so, and you're trying to decrease the target's health down to 0, or put a number of tokens onto that target until the tokens reach that target's health. Also, you have the diplomacy deck, which works in a very similar way. You're also playing cards, you're lining them up, you're matching symbols, but there's a tug-of-war element to it. You're negotiating, you're going back and forth in this verbal sparring, kind of like Grifflands, a digital deck-building game that I recently mentioned. Very similar to that, but done with cards in a completely different way. But I love the idea that there are these 2 decks. The one thing that I wanted, that I will mention, is, and I hope this appears later in the game. As I said, we only played a few hours, but I would love for there to be certain encounters where you decide if you want to approach it with combat or diplomacy. I bet that's in the game somewhere. We didn't encounter it, but I really would like to have that choice to get really good at combat or diplomacy, and then choose that when you encounter certain types of people. It doesn't make sense for a rat, but if I encountered another sentient being, if I could choose to fight them or encounter them with diplomacy. I think that would be really cool. But I really like that mechanism. I love the 2 decks, and I love the different cards in them. They're really thematic. But I think my favorite mechanism in the game is even more thematic than what I've mentioned so far. It's just a little thing, but I know it took a lot of effort to do. And that is when you end each day in the game, your character, depending on their location, has a dream specific to that location. And you read it out loud to the other players. And there's usually, for most locations, there's a dream and there's a nightmare. And I really like how this was used. It's just, as I said, it's kind of a little thing in the game. It doesn't impact the game in a huge way, but it really helps the theme, I thought, because you're walking around these locations and kind of, you're looking at the card. You can see some art on the card. There's some writing on the card to learn a little bit about what's going on there, but you don't really know the history behind it. But the dreams are used to inform you of that history. And I love that they're location specific. So if my character is on location 107, I'm going to read the dream for 107 that maybe tells me a little bit about the lore. Maybe it gives me a hint about how to play. The writers of this game, you can use these dreams, or have used these dreams in a lot of different ways to convey important information. And I love that it gives you a reason to end your turn on different locations so you can have different dreams. Also, I should have mentioned this before, you can also have nightmares. There can be bad things that happen during these dreams. My character was a little haunted, and so I had to read a nightmare once. It doesn't happen all the time, but sometimes you might be told, okay, you need to read the nightmare version of this dream instead of the normal dream. And then bad stuff mechanically can actually happen. I actually lost health when I woke up from one of my nightmares in the game. But I really, really like the theme behind that. The writing is excellent in this game. And I thought that was just a really, really clever way of telling story little tidbits at a time, telling the history of this world without being overbearing or taking up too much time with like long lengths of long paragraphs of reading. So I thought that was really cleverly done in Tainted Grail. If you've played this game, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments about what your favorite mechanism or thematic aspect of the game is, or even favorite component, because this is a really cool component, and even the miniatures are really beautiful too. And if any of these mechanisms remind you of other games that you want to talk about in the comments, I'd love to hear about them as well. Thanks!